You can almost see it now, the heavy oak doors of the great hall standing open to a corridor lined with tapestries, the air thick with the smell of beeswax and roasted almonds. It is midnight, yet the palace is stirring. You rise from your bed not in your own chamber, but in the imagined place where you are a quiet observer, invisible among the folds of velvet curtains and shadowed alcoves. The Queen's midnight banquets were never on the official calendar, they were whispered about in kitchens, hinted at in the servants' quarters, but rarely acknowledged in daylight. The torches in the corridor flicker as you follow the muffled strains of a lute, the music lilting in an odd, hypnotic pattern that makes your steps slow. It is not the hurried march of a daytime procession, but something more languid, almost secretive. You pass guards in embroidered tunics, their halberds resting against their shoulders, eyes half closed as though even they are caught in the enchantment of the hour. Inside the hall, the long trestle tables are draped and line the color of old ivory. Candles in wrought iron candelabra send rivers of warm light dancing over silver platters. On one, a whole pheasant is dressed again in its own feathers, tail spread wide like a fan. On another, there are pears poached in wine so dark they shine like garnets. At the head of the table, the Queen reclines slightly in a high-backed chair carved with heraldic lions. She is not in the stiff brocade of ceremony, but in a robe of deep green velvet lined with fur, the collar loose about her neck, her hair unbound and falling over her shoulders. You notice at once that her eyes are more alert at this hour than they are in the council chamber. Here, she is entirely in her element. Her voice is low but clear as she beckons a servant forward, instructing him to bring another jug of spiced wine cloves and cinnamon, carried on the steam. She laughs at something whispered by a visiting noble, the sound quicken. Warm, like the spark of a flint. Around her, the guests are a curious blend, foreign envoys in silks, minor lords from the countryside with cheeks still wind-burned from travel, and ladies of the court whose jewels catch the candlelight in glimmers of red and gold. This is not the carefully curated guest list of a state banquet. Here, the Queen invites whom she pleases. A merchant who has brought her glass beads from Venice might be seated next to a poet known for his wandering verses. A knight, still dusty from the road, might dine beside a lady whose perfume drifts like a slow tide. The conversation flows in a way it never does under the watchful eyes of daylight. A story about a hunt becomes a debate about the taste of imported spices. A jest about the weather turns into a spirited exchange about the merits of sleeping under heavy quilts versus fur pelts. You listen, unseen, and the hum of voices becomes a kind of lullaby. Servants move silently, refilling cups, replacing platters, offering bowls of almonds roasted with honey. Somewhere near the dais, a lute player plucks a tune with a rhythm like the gentle sway of a boat, and for a moment the whole room feels afloat adrift in the Queen's chosen hour. It is easy to forget that beyond these walls, the town sleeps under a blanket of frost, and that the sun will not rise for hours yet. There is something in her manner that hints at why these gatherings exist. Perhaps it is in the way she tilts her head when she listens, or the way she lets silence stretch before responding. Here, she can step outside the rigid lattice of court etiquette. Here, she may speak freely, laugh at a bawdy joke without a scribe noting it down, taste a dish without the master of ceremonies declaring it first. The midnight hour belongs to her, and she fills it with warmth, with voices, with the glow of many flames. As the night deepens, the Queen rises, and the company follows. There is no formal dismissal, no trumpet to announce the end. Instead, people drift away in twos and threes, murmuring their farewells, wrapping their cloaks around them before stepping into the shadowed halls. She lingers a moment longer, running her fingers along the back of her chair, as though pressing the memory of the evening into the wood itself. Then she turns, and with a soft rustle of velvet, she disappears into the corridor. And you, still unseen, feel the echo of the warmth she leaves behind the lingering music, the scent of cloves, the impression that in this hidden hour, the Queen was most herself. You follow the memory of the Queen into another chamber of her life, one far from the clink of goblets, and the warm press of candlelight. This place smells different, sharp with the scent of straw and fresh rushes underfoot, carrying faint notes of musk and fruit. It is not a stable for horses, nor a kennel for hounds. This is her private menagerie, tucked away behind the east wing of the palace, where most courtiers never tread. It is early morning in your mind's eye, the kind of pale dawn where frost rims the windows in delicate white lace. The Queen has come here before her ladies are even dressed for court. Her gown today is simpler, the hem brushing the straw-littered floor without ceremony, the sleeves pushed up to reveal arms bare to the elbow. A hood of deep crimson velvet frames her face, and she is smiling in that quiet, secret way she reserves for this place. The first to greet her is a green parrot from the Levant, its eyes bright as polished beads. It tilts its head, and mutters something in a language most of the court cannot understand. She laughs softly, offering it a slice of apple, which it takes with a quick, precise snap of its beak. Beyond the parrot's perch, you glimpse movement in Ursula pacing within a pen of carved wooden rails. Its spotted coat ripples as it moves, muscles flowing beneath fur, tail curling in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. This was a gift from a merchant who swore it came from jungles where the air itself was like warm water. Further down, a monkey small, wiry, with quick hand scrambles along a beam, chattering. It wears a thin collar of braided silk, and when the Queen extends her hand, it bounds down to sit upon her arm, reaching to touch the gold threads in her sleeve. She speaks to it in a tone that is part command, part lullaby, coaxing it to show the trick it has learned, a somersault from her arm to the floor and back again. The air is alive with the sounds of creatures not native to this cold northern realm, the flutter of exotic birds' wings, the deep purr of the ocelot, the monkey's quick, high notes. In the corner, a pair of white doves coo, their feathers as soft as flour. They are less rare, yet she treats them with the same care as the rest, scattering grain from her palm until they step close enough for her to stroke their wings. You notice that this room is not arranged for display. There are no gilded cages or gaudy collars meant to impress visiting dignitaries. Instead, the queen keeps the space warm with braziers, the rushes changed often to keep the air fresh, and small niches where each creature can retreat from the bustle of court life. It is here, in this tucked-away menagerie, that she can indulge her fascination without judgment. To her ladies, these animals are strange diversions. To her, they are living reminders that the world is larger than the narrow circle of the court. She studies them, noting how the ocelot's eyes narrow before it leaps, how the parrot tilts its head at unfamiliar sounds, how the monkey's fingers are always searching, always learning. She says once, to no one in particular, that she admires their honesty. They act on their natures without the layered games of politics. As you stand there, unseen, a servant brings a small covered dish. The queen lifts the lid to reveal figs, their skin splitting with ripeness. She breaks one open, the scent sweet and heady, and offers it to the monkey, who takes it with delicate precision. The parrot squawks as though jealous, and she turns to give it a piece as well, laughing at the commotion. When she finally leaves, she pauses at the door, glancing back over the room as though to fix it in her memory. For a moment, the frost-glazed world outside is far away. Here, in the warmth and the curious chatter of her companions, the queen is simply herself, a woman captivated by the untamed, keeping it close in a world that demands everything be controlled. It is the height of a late spring morning in your mind's picture, and the queen's private dressing chamber is a world unto itself. Sunlight, softened by panes of colored glass, falls in jewel-toned pools across the floor, where carpets from distant markets muffle every footstep. The air smells faintly of lavender and something richer, amber risen, perhaps clinging to the folds of the garments hung along the walls. Here, fashion is not simply clothing. For the queen, it is both armor and proclamation, and she has never been content with the limits of what the court decrees appropriate. You stand unseen in a corner as her women unfasten a large cedar chest, its lid carved with winding vines and tiny gilt leaves. Inside, the silks lie folded like water caught in stillness, shimmering in shades the kingdom's looms could never create. She chooses a gown of deep lapis blue, so heavily embroidered with gold that it catches the light with each movement. The pattern is not of her realm's heraldry but of curling pomegranates and curling vines from far-off lands, a design she once saw on a piece of imported cloth, and commissioned at great expense. When she steps into it, her ladies lift the weight of the skirt as though handling a sacred relic, arranging the folds to fall just so. Another chest yields a mantle lined with the fine feathers of exotic birds, crimson, emerald, and soft violet stitched into the fabric in overlapping patterns so they seem to ripple when she moves. A lady in waiting lifts it over her shoulders, and for a moment the queen seems more like some bird of paradise than a mortal woman. Her jewels are just as unorthodox. Rather than the familiar pearls and diamonds favored by most queens, she wears amber carved into intricate cameos, turquoise set in heavy gold filigree, and beads of carved coral that catch the light like drops of blood orange. Each piece tells a story, a gift from a visiting envoy, a treasure purchased from a spice trader, a trinket rescued from a shipwreck. The finishing touch is the scent vials of oil arranged on a table of polished walnut, each with its own stopper carved in the likeness of a flower or fruit. She chooses one today made from crushed rose petals and a hint of frankincense. As her maid smooths it along the hem of her sleeves and the folds of her veil, the scent rises softly, lingering in the warm air. In the court, such extravagance walks a narrow edge between admiration and scandal. Some say she dresses to unsettle the council, others that she does it to remind them of her reach beyond their borders. But here, in the safety of her chamber, she dresses for herself. Every stitch, every feather, every gleam of gold is a small rebellion against the sameness expected of her. When she finally steps out into the hall, the rustle of her gown is as much a herald as the trumpet fanfare. Heads turn, conversations pause, and even the most seasoned courtiers cannot help but take in the details. Whether they approve or disapprove is of no concern to her. What matters is that they look, and that they remember. You remain in the quiet she leaves behind, the lingering shimmer of silk, and the faint perfume of rose and resin still hanging in the air, as though the room itself has dressed for the day. The queen's gardens are not the broad, sunlit lawns that visiting envoys admire from the terrace. Those are for display, for stately walks, for formal receptions, for the careful parting of roses bred to match the heraldic colors of the realm. No, the gardens you are about to step into lie beyond a narrow archway at the rear of the palace grounds, concealed by a wall of yew so dense it seems to drink in the light. You pass through the arch, and feel the air change. It is warmer here, as if the high stone walls have trapped a pocket of another season. The ground is paved not with gravel, but with worn bricks, their gaps sprouting tiny mosses in shades of emerald. The scent is intoxicating, rich soil, crushed leaves, and blossoms that seem almost too fragrant to be real. Here, the queen keeps plants deemed foreign, strange, or unworthy of the court's official gardens. Some she has acquired through traders who whisper their names as if they were spells, others come as gifts from distant allies, wrapped in damp cloth and packed in wooden crates that smell faintly of sea air. You notice a tall stalk crowned with flowers the color of fresh cream, each petal tipped with crimson. This, the gardener tells her in hushed tones, is from a place where the sun burns for months without rest. Nearby, a cluster of tiny blue blossoms trembles on delicate stems, flowers that are said to be unlucky to grow within city walls, though here they thrive in the queen's protection. She walks slowly, trailing her fingers along leaves that feel like velvet, pausing to breathe in the scent of a blossom that only opens at dusk. In one corner, she kneels to check on a pot of pale, ghost-like orchids. They are watered with melted snow collected in midwinter, a ritual her gardener swears is essential to their survival. The sounds of the palace are far away here. Instead, you hear the faint hum of bees, kept not in the large hives of the kitchen garden, but in tiny woven skeps tucked discreetly among the flowers. They are small, golden, and as devoted to this hidden place as the queen herself. Every plant here seems to hold a story. That rosebush, with its deep violet petals, was a gift from a desert emir whose wife once visited incognito. The herb patch of lemon balm and mint was smuggled in from a monastery garden after the abbess declared them too vigorous for holy ground. Even the ivy climbing the back wall was transplanted from a ruin, its roots carrying the memory of a crumbled tower. For the queen, this is more than a retreat, it is an act of quiet defiance. In a world where her choices are scrutinized, judged, and often dictated by others, here she decides what grows and what thrives. The forbidden flowers bloom under her watch, their colors richer, their scents stronger, as if they know they have been chosen. When she finally leaves, she gathers nothing. The flowers remain where they are, untouched, their beauty meant for the moment alone. You follow her back through the yew arch, carrying with you the memory of that hidden, fragrant world where each petal is both a secret and a victory. Night falls softly over the palace, wrapping its towers in a deep indigo haze. The corridors grow still as candles burn lower in their sconces, leaving small golden halos against the stone. While most of the court retreats to their chambers without ceremony, the queen begins the quiet ritual she has kept for years, a series of steps that seem, to those who know of them, curious and perhaps a touch unsettling. You find yourself in her bedchamber, a room larger than some village cottages, though every corner is softened by velvet hangings and woven carpets. The ceiling beams are dark with age, the air faintly scented with rosewater and the sharper tang of beeswax from the many candles waiting to be lit. Before she undresses, the queen has her ladies bring out 4 tall mirror panels of polished glass framed in carved walnut, their surfaces gleaming faintly in the candlelight. They place them in a loose ring around her bed so that, no matter where one stands, the bed is reflected again and again. To the court physician, she has said this is to ward the soul during sleep, ensuring it finds its way back to the body come morning. Whether this belief is rooted in old superstition or some tale from her childhood, none can say. Once the mirrors are in place, the bed itself is prepared. First comes the mattress, thick with layers of wool and stuffed feathers, smoothed until not a wrinkle shows. Over it, sheets of fine linen cool to the touch are spread, followed by a coverlet embroidered with twisting vines in gold thread. At the foot of the bed, a small brazier burns low, releasing the faint scent of lavender sprigs placed atop the coals. She changes into a gown of soft, undyed silk, the fabric so light it whispers against her skin. One of her ladies braids her hair loosely, weaving in a ribbon scented with rosemary. Another brings a shallow bowl of warmed milk infused with honey. She drinks it slowly, each sip part of the winding down. Next comes the circle of candles, dozens of them set in silver holders on tables around the room. Their flames flicker in the mirrors, multiplying until it feels as if the chamber is afloat in a sea of light. She walks once around the bed, touching each mirror frame lightly with her fingertips, as though greeting an old friend. When she finally lies down, she does so not in haste, but as if this moment, the closing of the day, is as important as the opening of it. The quilt is drawn up to her shoulders, the brazier's warmth mingling with the faint chill of the stone walls. Her breathing slows. The mirrors stand silent watch, each one holding her reflection in its still surface. The palace beyond this chamber is dark now, the sounds of the night reduced to the occasional creak of timbers or the distant bark of a guard dog. Here, inside this circle of glass and flame, the queen drifts toward sleep with the serene assurance that she has prepared her dreams to be as ordered as her waking hours. And you, invisible at the foot of her bed, feel the gentle weight of the ritual settle into your own bones, a rhythm of ending that promises the safety of return when morning comes. Morning light spills into the queen's private bath chamber, filtering through high windows glazed with pale, watery glass. The air is heavy with steam, curling in lazy tendrils toward the beams above, carrying the mingled scents of fresh herbs, warmed milk, and the faint sweetness of honey. Here, far from the cold corridors and the stiff formality of the audience hall, the queen indulges in a ritual that is both necessity and quiet pleasure. The bath itself is a large wooden tub, bound with iron hoops and polished until the grain glows. Today, it is filled not with plain water but with a mixture of warm goat's milk and a drizzle of honey, whisked together until the surface gleams like pale satin. A handful of crushed rose petals floats on top, their color deepening in the heat, releasing a perfume that lingers in the steam. Before she steps in, her attendants lay out towels of softest lion, warmed before the fire. A small brazier stands nearby, upon which rests a pot of melted beeswax and olive oil used to soften the skin after bathing. At the tub's edge, a low table holds sprigs of rosemary, bunches of lavender, and stalks of mint, ready to be dipped in the milk and brushed gently along her arms and shoulders. The queen slips into the bath with the unhurried grace of someone entirely at home in the water. The milk clings to her skin in a thin, velvety sheen. One of her ladies kneels beside the tub, trailing a rosemary sprig along her arm, the tiny leaves releasing their sharp, clean scent into the air. Another pours warm water over her hair, dark strands gleaming as they catch the light. This is not a hurried cleansing, nor a display for anyone's benefit. It is a slow, deliberate ceremony. Between rinses, the queen closes her eyes and breathes deeply, letting the steam open her lungs. She listens to the quiet drip of water back into the tub, the occasional creak of the wood as it shifts with the heat. Outside these walls, the day has already begun. Merchants setting up their stalls, guards pacing the gates, but none of that reaches here. Once the bathing is complete, she is wrapped in a towel still warm from the hearth. The olive oil and beeswax mixture is smoothed over her arms and neck, leaving her skin with a soft, subtle glow. Her hair is combed through with a wide-toothed comb carved from bone, the teeth gliding easily through the damp strands. By the time she steps from the chamber, the queen carries with her the faint mingling of milk, honey, and herbs, a scent so distinctive that those who serve her say they can tell when she has bathed simply by walking into a room. For her, this lingering fragrance is as much a part of her presence as the jewels she wears or the words she speaks. And as you watch, unseen, you realize that this ritual, lavish though it may seem, is not about vanity alone. It is her armor for the day, a layer of comfort and quiet luxury that will remain with her long after the warmth of the bath has faded. By late afternoon, when the sun slants through the palace like a ribbon of pale gold, the queen retreats to a chamber few courtiers ever enter. It is not quite a music room in the formal sense, no grand dais, no ranks of velvet chairs for an audience, as much as a sanctuary arranged for listening. The walls are paneled in dark wood that drinks in the echoes, and the ceiling is hung with woven tapestries that soften every note. You step inside, unseen as ever, and feel the shift at once, the hush that asks the world to lower its voice. Along the far wall rests a line of instruments that would bewilder many of her guests. There are familiar shapes of psaltery with strings that glimmer like winter light, a rebec tucked into its lion wrap, but there are also curiosities carried across deserts and seas. A long-necked lute with a rounded belly rests on a cushion embroidered with stars, a small frame drum, its skin painted with a faded vine pattern, leans against a wooden stand. A cluster of tiny bells, each no bigger than a hazelnut, hangs from a braided cord. On a side table sits a wooden cup filled not with wine, but with smooth glass rods, each tuned to ring when rubbed with a dampened finger. The queen's fascination is not with spectacle but with timbre, how sound feels in the chest as much as how it rings in the ear. She invites musicians who can play softly, who understand that a note can be a gesture rather than a shout. When they arrive this evening, they do not bow with the stiffness of court performance. Instead, they move as careful guests might, lifting instruments the way one lifts a sleeping child, with attention and a little awe. She asks for music from far places, but never the battle marches or triumphal fanfares the court expects. She prefers tunes that wander, melodies that curl like smoke. The player of the foreign lute tunes a string against another, then against his own voice, humming until the two tones settle into a single, quiet thread. A woman with the frame drum traces her fingertips along the drum head, drawing a sound so gentle it is more like breath than percussion. The first piece begins almost invisibly, a murmur from the lute's low strings, then a single bell's kiss of silver. The queen closes her eyes, not from weariness but from intention, as if to listen is to travel. The melody leans on notes you do not expect if you are used to the square, church-strict modes. It dips between pitches like a bird weaving through branches, then lingers where the ear wants to rest. You notice how the tapestries shift the air, each soft panel turning sharpness into warmth, until the room itself seems to hum. Between pieces, the queen asks questions the way a gardener asks about seed. Where did you learn that cadence? What wind does that drum imitate? Is there a name for the scale that falls like rain? She is not gathering trivia for conversation but building a little library of sound inside herself. She asks the lutenist to play the same phrase 3 times and slow as a candle's drip, once with the smallest lift at the end like a sigh caught and released, and once as if the note were a path one walks barefoot in summer. He smiles and complies, and somehow the same few tones arrive as 3 different evenings. Some night she experiments with the room, opening a shutter by the west window so that a sliver of outdoor air can thread itself into the music. The change is slight but certain, the strings seem to carry farther, the drum breathes a little drier. On winter nights she keeps the shutters tight and burns a small brazier of juniper. The smoke lends the sound a resinous weight, and the bells feel rounder, less prone to scatter. She learns these adjustments the way a cook learns the appetite of a hearth-turning a vent here, moving a stool there, until sound blooms with the gentleness she seeks. There is a notebook. 2 goatskin pages ruled by a careful hand where a scribe records not the notes exactly, for the writing of music still belongs more to memory than parchment, but images and phrases, a melody like a path after rain, bell in the distance, never near, drum as soft as a muff's wing. These become cues, anchors for revisiting what is otherwise too delicate to bind. The queen occasionally adds a line herself, her script smaller and more angled than the scribe's, noting dusk key for the mode that seems to cradle tired thoughts without stirring them back awake. Her favorite moment in these evenings arrives when musician, and room and listener meet at the exact pressure of quiet. The lutenist holds a note just long enough to set a shiver in the wood of the paneling. The bell sounds once, allowed to diminish until it is more remembered than heard. The frame drum gives one slow heartbeat and rests. In the hush afterward, no one moves. Even you feel it, a gentle settling inside the ribs, as if your own breath has learned the room's slower rhythm. There are occasional visitors. A scholar from the south once brought a wind harp no larger than a child's toy. They set it in the open window on a mild evening, and the breeze plucked it without human hands, weaving a thin, soft silvering of sound through the chamber's warmth. Another time a traveling singer came with stories braided to melodies, tunes that rose and fell with the sea's pulse, then leveled out into something near a prayer. The queen, who rarely shows her private feelings, let the smallest smile rest in the corner of her mouth as he sang, as if the song had set a lamp on in a distant room of her mind. When the hour grows late, she does not dismiss the musicians with coins tossed like crumbs. She thanks each one by name and asks what they need for the journey: oiled strings, a leather wrap, a pouch of dried fruit. Gifts are given, but never publicly. The court can keep its performances and applause. What happens here belongs to the quiet part of the day, the part that readies a soul for sleep. As they pack away their instruments, the queen lingers with the bells. She lifts the cord and lets them chime once against her palm, a sound so small it might be mistaken for memory. Then she sets them down and stands in the doorway a moment, listening to the room after the music has left it. There is a sweetness to that emptiness, a soft outline where sound had been, like the shape a bird leaves in the air after it glides past. You follow her into the corridor, where the light is dimmer and the world more ordinary. Still, the chamber's hush follows, like a shawl drawn lightly across the shoulders. When she walks, her steps seem timed to a rhythm you cannot hear but can feel. You think of how the music chose smallness over show, and how that smallness enlarged the evening, rounding its edges so that it might fit more gently into the night. And when the door closes, and the tape strays settle back against the walls, the room holds its secret, that a queen's power need not shout to be felt. Sometimes it is a bell the size of a hazelnut, a breath across a string, a heartbeat on a drum no louder than a whisper, teaching the palace and you to fall quietly toward sleep. The queen's writing table is small by royal standards, no more than a polished plank of walnut set before a tall, narrow window. In daylight, this is where she signs decrees and reviews reports, her hand moving with the steady formality expected of a ruler. But at night, after the hallways have emptied, and the only light comes from a single beeswax candle, this desk transforms into something else entirely, a place for sending words across borders in ways the court must never see. Tonight, you stand in the shadow of the door as she opens a carved coffer. Inside are not the official parchments with their stiff red ribbons and heavy seals, but slim folded sheets of vellum, each no larger than her palm. Their edges are clean, the surface so smooth it catches the candlelight. Resting alongside them are little cloth sachets tied with silk thread, filled with dried blossoms and spices. She takes a sheet and dips her pen into the inkpot, not the thick black of legal documents, but a softer brown, scented faintly of clove. Her handwriting here is different, smaller, more curved, as if the words themselves are leaning in to be closer. The message she writes is not in the court's Latin nor in the local tongue, but in a language learned from a merchant's wife who once lodged at the palace. You cannot read the words, but the shape of them feels less like decree and more like a whisper. When the letter is finished, she folds it twice and slides it into a thin paper sleeve. From the coffer she selects a pinch of dried orange blossom and a shaving of cedarwood, tucking them into the fold. She warms a small iron spoon over the candle, melting beeswax infused with rose oil, and drips it over the join before pressing in it. Seal not her royal crest, but a tiny star. The delivery is as secretive as the writing. She does not trust the court's messengers, whose bags are checked at the gates. Instead, the letters go with trusted merchants who travel under the banner of trade. One waits for her now in the scullery, blending in with the kitchen's bustle. When she hands over the letter, wrapped in plain cloth, it could be mistaken for a shopping list or an order for imported spices. These perfumed letters are not all romance, though some surely are. Others carry thanks for a rare gift, or a question about a distant custom, or an account of some small moment a night when the moonlight struck the chapel window just so, a morning when the frost painted the garden like lace. She writes these things not for politics or for history, but for connection, the thin thread between two people who may never meet again. In the receiving, she is just as careful. The coffer also holds letters from far places, each one faint, with the scent of whatever blossoms were tucked inside. Some are so old the perfume has faded to memory, others release their fragrance as though the petals had been dried only yesterday. She reads them slowly, often more than once, as if each word might reveal a little more the second time. For the queen, the scent is as important as the ink. To her, a letter without perfume is like a song without melody. She believes the fragrance carries something of the sender's breath, their presence lingering even after the paper has yellowed. In a court where every word is measured for advantage, these letters are the rarest of things, messages meant only to be felt, not used. When she closes the coffer and douses the candle, the scent lingers in the air, orange blossom, cedar, a trace of rose. You breathe it in without meaning to, and it feels like a door left ajar in the mind, a promise of something beyond the cold stone walls. And though the palace will wake tomorrow to the same routines, somewhere far away, a letter is already on its way back to her, carrying another ghost of fragrance across the miles. The queen's treasury is not the echoing stone vault imagined by most of her subjects, with rows of guards and chests stacked high like a miser's dream. It is instead a long, narrow gallery lit by high windows, the kind of light that shifts slowly over the course of the day, glancing off polished surfaces in glimmers rather than glares. You step inside with her one late afternoon. The air here is cooler, still scented faintly of the cedar wood used to line the cabinets. This is not where the kingdom's coin is stored, nor its ceremonial regalia for coronations and state processions. This is her private collection, jewels gathered not for their value alone, but for their stories. The first case holds pearls, but not the round, white spheres worn at every court in Christendom. These are uneven, shaped like teardrops and moons, their colors ranging from soft silver to a blush of pink. She tells her attendant that they were traded to her grandfather by a sailor who claimed to have fished them from the waters near a far southern coast where the air tastes of salt all year. Beside them lies a necklace of polished amber, each bead trapping some ancient fleck of Lyphian gnat's wing, a curl of plant matter suspended in golden resin. She runs her thumb along one bead, murmuring that it feels like holding a small sun. The chain was a gift from a Baltic trader whose ship she once allowed to dock without tariff during a storm. On another shelf rests a cluster of deep green stones, raw and unpolished, the size of walnuts. They are emeralds, though most courtiers would not recognize them without their jeweler's cut. She keeps them as they came to her, embedded in a lump of rock that looks unremarkable until the light catches a glint of green deep within. They were carried to her by a caravan master from the mountains beyond the reach of her maps. She pauses before a small lacquered box inlaid with mother of pearl. Inside is a ring carved from a single piece of jade, the color of moss after rain. It is smooth to the touch, almost warm. She wears it sometimes in the gardens, where the shade and damp air make its green seem to deepen. That piece came from a scholar who traveled with envoys from the east, its exact path lost to all but rumor. Most striking of all is a narrow velvet tray upon which rests a chain strung with tiny, irregular sapphires, each a slightly different huiski, cornflower, storm. The queen says they were collected one at a time, each from a different mine in a different land, and strung together so that the world's many skies could meet around a single throat. She does not hoard these treasures in darkness. On certain mornings, she has them brought to a small windowed table, where she can hold each piece to the light. Sometimes she tries them against a gown or a veil, not for a public appearance but for her own pleasure. She might pin a brooch of garnets to her sleeve simply to watch them glow in the firelight, or set the jade ring beside her plate at supper as a quiet companion. It is not lost on her that each gem carries its own kind of journey, dug from the earth, passed from hand to hand, crossing seas and mountains before it reached her. The stones are, in their way, as much travelers as the merchants who bring them. When she leaves the gallery, the light has shifted again. A single beam from the high window falls across the velvet tray of sapphires, making them shimmer as if the sky itself had spilled onto the table. She closes the door softly, leaving the gems to their quiet glimmer until the next time she calls them back into her hands. The palace ballroom by day is a place of stiff etiquette, polished floors reflecting the gold-leafed ceiling, courtiers moving in measured patterns under the gaze of watchful stewards. But tonight, the light is different. The great crystal chandeliers are dimmed, their candles replaced by dozens of smaller tapers tucked into wall sconces and candelabra, casting pools of flickering light that turn corners into shadows. It is the night of the queen's most unorthodox entertainments, the masquerade ball. Invitations are whispered, not written. Those who attend must follow her single unbreakable rule: everyone, no matter rank or station, must come in disguise. You slip into the edge of the hall, unseen, and take in the scene. The courtiers are unrecognizable, their faces hidden behind masks of velvet, leather, and painted paper. Some are animals: a fox with a plume of scarlet feathers, a blackbird with a beak tipped in gold. Others wear faces of saints or devils, their eyes peering through the hollow expressions. There is laughter in the air, but it is softer than usual, shaped by the uncertainty of who might stand before you. And then there is the queen. She is impossible to pick out at first. She has traded her crown for a simple mask of pearl white, her gown for a flowing garment of pale silver that glimmers like moonlight on water. Her hair is hidden beneath a gauzy veil, and she wears no jewels save a narrow ribbon around her wrist. If you did not know better, you might pass her without notice, thinking her a lady of no particular rank. That, of course, is the point. In this hall, she can dance with whom she wishes without the weight of title. She can ask questions without her words being recorded. She can listen to conversations meant for strangers and learn what people say when they believe no ruler hears them. The music tonight is lively but not overbearing flutes, viols, and a small drum keeping time. The dancers swirl in pairs and groups, the rustle of silk and brocade mingling with the soft scuff of slippers against the polished floor. At intervals, masked figures slip into the shadowed alcoves along the walls, where they exchange whispers and small gifts. A ring slipped into a palm, a folded scrap of parchment, a sprig of rosemary. As you watch, the queen dances with a man in the costume of a falcon, his mask carved from wood and inlaid with brass. She tilts her head as they speak, and though you cannot hear their words, you catch the low timbre of her louder unguarded, free from the formality of the throne. Later, she trades partners for a woman dressed as a hare, her mask painted with delicate whiskers, the two of them moving together in a slow, looping pattern that seems more like shared conversation than dance. The food, too, is part of the illusion. Platters appear bearing small, elaborate morsels, figs wrapped in honeyed pastry, cheese infused with herbs from the royal gardens, candied orange peel dusted with cinnamon. Guests take them without the bowing and scraping of formal banquets, eating as they wander or pausing mid-conversation to taste. At midnight, the musicians change to a softer tune. The queen slips away from the main floor, disappearing into the crowd. Minutes later, she reappears still masked beside the punch table, speaking with two young pages in simple linen, their eyes wide as they realize she is listening more than she speaks. It is a reminder that the disguises work both ways. She can hear truth as easily as gossip. The ball lasts until the candles burn low and the air is warm with breath and laughter. When the final dance ends, there is no unmasking, no public reveal. Guests leave as they cam mysteries to one another, unsure who they greeted or who they passed in the crowd. The queen lingers for a moment in the emptying hall, her silver gown whispering against the floor. She lifts her mask only once she is alone, revealing a face not wary from the night but alight with something like mischief. She leaves the hall without a sound, and the masks, the music, the glimmering shadows remain behind like a dream half remembered. The queen's feasts are famous throughout her realm, but not for the reasons most royal banquets are remembered. There is no endless parade of roasted boar, no predictable towers of sugared fruits arranged to impress foreign envoys. Instead, she is known for the unusual, the unexpected dishes that cause a stir not through excess, but through curiosity. You enter the great hall as preparations are underway. The long tables are dressed in deep green cloth embroidered with golden vines, the flicker of hundreds of candles catching the thread and making it shimmer. Servants move briskly but quietly, carrying trays covered in linen. The air smells of roasting meat, yes, but also of something sharper, spiced, and almost sweet. When the queen arrives, she does so without the heavy mantle of state. Her gown tonight is a warm shade of russet, the color of autumn leaves, with a collar trimmed in fur. She greets her guests not with a speech, but with a gesture toward the first course. A servant lifts the cover from the first platter, revealing small birds ortolans roasted whole and glazed with honey infused with rosemary. Their delicate size makes them as much a marvel as a meal, and guests exchange glances before daring to taste. On another tray, a pie is cut open to reveal not pigeon or rabbit, but eels, their flesh pale and tender, stewed with leeks and nutmeg. From the kitchens comes a bowl of stew thick with meat no one at court has seen before, guinea fowl, brought in secret by a merchant from the southern coast. It is simmered with almonds, raisins, and a blend of spices that seem to warm the blood. The queen watches her guests take cautious first bites, smiling faintly as their expressions change from doubt to delight. The bread tonight is dark, dense with chestnut flour, served with soft cheese rolled in crushed herbs. There is no wine in the cups at the first serving, but spiced satyr heated just to the edge of boiling, its steam carrying notes of clove and orange peel. Later she will have the wine poured, but only after the palate has been woken by the unfamiliar. Dessert is no less surprising, a pudding made from rice, a grain rare in this kingdom, cooked in almond milk and sweetened with cane sugar from far-off islands. It is served with candied violets that crack lightly under the teeth, leaving behind their perfumed sweetness. To the queen, these meals are not mere indulgences, they are an education in taste, a reminder that the world is far larger than the court's routine. She often speaks with the cooks afterward, asking how the ingredients were prepared, how long they traveled, and whether the spices changed along the way. The knowledge pleases her as much as the flavor itself. Her guests, once wary, begin to look forward to these feasts. Some speak of them for weeks afterward, describing dishes they can scarcely name. A visiting noble once wrote to his sister that the queen's table was a map one could eat, each course a different country. As the evening draws on, the hall grows warmer with conversation and the mingled aromas of the feast. When the final dish is cleared, the queen rises, her russet gown glowing in the candlelight. She offers no grand toast, only a simple, May your tongues never grow tired of new things. It is part blessing, part challenge. When you leave the hall with the last of the guests, the air outside feels almost plain after the riot of scents and flavors within. But somewhere in your mind, a taste lingers, a little sweet, a little strange, impossible to forget. The room is not marked on any map of the palace. It lies beyond a narrow stairwell seldom used, the steps worn smooth by fewer feet than the grand halls below. At the top, a single oak door stands unguarded. You follow the queen here one evening, your invisible steps echoing softly against the stone. She carries no attendants, only a small key that glints once in the torchlight before she slips it into the lock. Inside, the air is warm and still, scented faintly with beeswax and the ghost of burning resin. The light is dim, but you see at once. What makes this chamber unlike any other? Mirrors, dozens of them, lining the walls from floor to ceiling. Some are tall and narrow, their frames carved in spirals of gilt, others are small, round, and rimmed with dark wood. Between them, hundreds of candles stand on wrought iron holders, on shelves, on the floor itself, each flame multiplied endlessly in the glass. The queen steps inside and closes the door with a quiet click. She moves with the calm assurance of someone performing a well-practiced ritual. Beginning at the farthest corner, she lights each candle in turn. The flames grow until the room seems to pulse with gold, the reflections running deep into the mirrors like corridors of light. In the center of the chamber sits a low stool draped with velvet. She takes her place there, folding her hands in her lap, her face reflected again and again from every angle. In some mirrors she is close, in others far away, in one, she is only a fragment, the edge of a cheek, the curve of a shoulder. The effect is both infinite and intimate, as though she is surrounded by all the versions of herself she has ever been. For a long while, she does nothing but sit, breathing in the scent of the candles and the faint tang of polished glass. Then, slowly, she begins to speak, not to you, not to any living listener, but to the reflections. Her words are soft, unhurried, almost like prayer. Sometimes they are in the court's tongue, other times in a language you do not recognize. You catch phrases that sound like questions, and others that might be answers only she can hear. Some say this room is a place where she communes with her own fate, asking the mirrors to show her truths hidden from the court. Others whisper that she believes each reflection holds a fragment of her soul, and that tending to them keeps her whole. Whether these tales are true or not, the queen's devotion is unmistakable. She moves among the mirrors with a kind of reverence, pausing now and then to polish a glass with a square of lion, or to adjust a candle so that its flame burns steady. When all the candles are lit and her circuit is complete, she stands in the center again. The light gathers around her like a cloak, warm and almost weightless. She closes her eyes, and for a moment, the chamber feels outside of time. The reflections watch in perfect stillness, their silent flames flickering in unison. After what might be minutes or hours, she begins to extinguish the candles, one by one, until only a few remain. The mirrors darken, returning to simple glass. She leaves them so, perhaps to remind herself that even the brightest visions must fade. As she steps out, locking the door behind her, the scent of beeswax clings to her gown, and the faint memory of the multiplied light lingers in the air around her. The rest of the palace sleeps unaware, but you know the chamber still holds its watch, waiting for her return. The queen's great hall is meant for audiences, for the solemn petitions of nobles, and the formal greetings of visiting envoys. But tonight, it serves another purpose entirely. The thrones are left empty, the heralds dismissed. In their place, the space is arranged more like an evening hearth, benches and cushions gathered in a loose circle, braziers burning low to cast a warm, flickering light. You arrive with her just as the first guest steps forward, a man in a long, dust-colored robe, his face weathered by travel, eyes bright as if still carrying the light of the road. He bows, but not deeply, as though the queen had told him to save such formality for another time. She offers him a place near the largest brazier, where the coals glow red beneath a bed of ash, and gestures for the others to draw close. The storytellers she invites come from places far beyond the reach of her banners. One might arrive from the coasts where the air is thick with salt, and the gulls wheel overhead, another from the mountain passes where snow drifts even in midsummer. They bring nothing more than their voices and the memories they carry, but in this circle, that is enough. Tonight's first tale is of a river that runs so wide it takes 3 days to cross, of a city built entirely on stilts above its waters. The man's voice is deep, unhurried, the rhythm of someone who knows his story must last until the fire dies down. The queen listens without interrupting, her chin resting lightly on her knuckles, eyes fixed on the teller as though she could see the places he describes. Between stories, servants pass cups of spiced wine and small dishes of dates, figs, and almonds. The food is simple but chosen to match the tal fruits from the coast to accompany a sailor's account, or roasted nuts when the story is of forest hunts. This quiet pairing of taste and word seems to please the queen, and she encourages her guests to eat and drink freely. The second storyteller is a woman with a voice like lion drawn over wood, soft, but with an undercurrent of strength. She speaks of a desert caravan that followed a trail of stars for 40 nights, of sandstorms that erased all footprints by morning, of the way the air seemed to hum when the sun sank below the dunes. Her hands move as she speaks, drawing invisible maps in the air, tracing the curve of wind-shaped hills. The queen leans forward, asking how the travelers found their way once the stars were hidden. The woman smiles and replies that they followed the sound of wind in the tent ropes, the subtle shift in its note when it blew toward home. This answer draws a murmur of appreciation from the circle, and the queen nods as if she has just been given a secret. Some nights, the stories are ancient ones, told and retold until their origins are lost. Tales of kings who bargained with the sea, of women who spoke the language of birds, of towers built so high they brushed the clouds. Other times, they are personal accounts, like the shepherd who described a single winter so harsh he slept beside his flock to keep them alive, or the merchant who once bartered a sack of saffron for safe passage through a warlord's territory. The queen treasures them all. For her, these gatherings are as much a window as a pleasure through these voices. She travels without moving, gathering bits of the world she may never see. And for the tellers, there is the rare honor of speaking without the weight of protocol, of being listened to as equals, their words valued for their truth, not their usefulness. When the last story is told, the fire has burned low, and the braziers glow like sleeping embers. The queen thanks each storyteller by name, giving small gifts, sometimes a silver brooch, sometimes a pouch of dried herbs from her own garden. She walks them to the door herself, a courtesy no courtier would expect, and watches until their figures vanish into the dark. As the hall empties, the warmth of the stories seems to linger in the air, mingling with the fading scent of spice and smoke. You follow her out into the corridor, carrying with you fragments of far-off places, a river's breadth, a desert's wind, a tower in the clouds, and the sense that the queen's realm, for all its walls and boundaries, is larger each time a story is told. You step into the queen's wardrobe as into a small and fragrant country, one bordered not by rivers and hedges but by rails of silk and stacks of folded linen, by trunks of cedarwood and shelves where the air itself seems to carry memory. The room is long and low-ceilinged, its beams dark with age. Light comes in through two narrow windows glazed with wavery glass, laying pale rectangles across the floor. The first breath you take is a surprise, not merely the clean, dry scent of cloth, but something layered: orange peel and frankincense, a hint of clove, the green note of crushed bay, and beneath it all the comforting sweetness of cedar. The queen does not store her garments as most rulers do, piled by color or rank. She tends them, like a gardener tends beds, grouping by fragrance and season. At the far end, near the windows, hangs the spring rail, gowns of soft spun wool and light silk, each wrapped with a sachet of dried violet and lemon balm. When the breeze slides in, that rail smells like waking gardens and clean rain. Beside it stands a low chest of ribbons perfumed with lavender. When a lady's hand lifts the lid, a little cloud of summer rises as if the sun had been folded into the weave and kept there. Along the inner wall, the autumn rail waits, deeper colors, thicker weaves, silk lined with fur. Their sachets hold clove, orange peel, and a shaving of cinnamon. The air around them is warm even when the windows breathe a chill. Sometimes the queen will pause here in high summer, eyes half closed, and breathe in the spice as if to steady herself against heat and noise, to remind her skin that the year will turn, that evenings will grow long again. Closest to the door, where the room stays coolest, hangs winter, velvet that drinks candlelight, wool as soft as well-slept snow. Those garments carry frankincense and myrrh in their hems, and a dusting of ground bay leaf worked into the lining. The scent is church and hearth at once, solemn and comforting, a reminder of both prayer and bread. The queen favors these when councils run late and the stone corridors keep the day's cold pressed inside them. The trunk row is its own geography. Each chest is cedar-lined and banded with iron, the lids carved with little stories, vines that twine into birds, waves that curl into ships. Inside, folded linens lie like light, and between the layers rest slips of paper scented with rose and sandalwood. There is a trunk for undergowns that smell faintly of almond, another for veils cooled with mint. One holds traveling cloaks that taste of smoke and pine, each dusted with powdered juniper so that, after a night ride, the cloak returns to its place carrying the forest in its threads. On a narrow shelf, by the door, stand small glass bottles stoppered with beeswax, each labeled in a careful hand: aeroli, orris, sadder, rosemary, angelica. These are not for skin, they are for cloth. The queen learned the trick from a visiting dyer who taught her how a garment keeps a mood better than a person does. With a lion pad she dabs a sleeve with orris if she must sit for a portrait. Orris steadies the breath, the dyer said. Before an audience with a quarrelsome lord, she brushes the hem with rosemary, which was meant to sharpen memory and cheer the mind. On long gray days when letters bring nothing but accounts and disputes, she slips on a veil that smells of neroli because it reminds her of the fruit market in a coastal town she saw once, where the sellers laughed even in the rain. Her ladies have learned the rhythm of this wardrobe. One records which sachet belongs to which gown, replacing the herbs before they turn dusty and pale. Another tends the cedar, oiling the chests so their sweetness does not fade and checking for any moth daring enough to trespass. A third keeps the mending basket near the window, where light falls cleanest on a frayed cuff or loosened seam. Even the mending threads have their scents, A twist of beeswax rubbed along the strand leaves behind a honeyed trace that later rises when the cloth is warmed by the body. Visitors sometimes ask why the queen troubles with such elaborate care when a ruler could simply demand new garments. She will smile and say that newness is not the point. Cloth that has been worn and scented and kept carefully becomes a kind of diary. She can lift a gown and remember a winter council by the frankincense stitched into its lining, or a spring ride by the breath of damp mint held in the hem. Memory clings to fabric better than it clings to stone walls. There is a corner cupboard, the smallest shrine in this fragrant country, where she keeps remnants and ribbons that arrived with gifts from abroad. A strip of indigo-dyed cotton that smells of wood smoke and salt, a tassel from a caravan saddle, spiced with cardamom, a red silk cord that carries a far-off market's dust in its twists. She does not wear these. She simply opens the cupboard when the court feels too narrow, and lets the scents speak of distance. Once each season, the queen walks the wardrobe alone. She moves slowly along the rails, touching sleeves, checking sachets, listening to the room as if it might have something to say. At the spring rail, she pauses beside a pale green gown and adjusts the ribbon sachet so the lemon balm does not overwhelm the violet. At the winter rail, she presses her cheek for a moment to a velvet shoulder, the frankincense rising like a memory of snow. At the trunk row, she refolds a veil so the rose slips lie in a new place, as though turning a page. There is a practical wisdom to all this. Fragrance hides the faint smells a palace collects, smoke from the kitchens, the iron tang from the armory yard, the dampness that creeps from old stones when it rains 3 days running. It also speaks for her when she chooses silence. Courtiers begin to say they can tell her mood by the air she carries. Neroli for bright patience, cedar for steadiness, clove when she means to press a matter gently but firmly. No proclamation is needed. The cloth moves, the scent follows, and the room learns. Today, as you stand in the doorway, she chooses a gown from the summer rail, a thin woven silk the color of new pears. She slips a fresh sachet into the fold of the sleeve, one stitched with tiny blue thread to mark it as mint and chamomile. Before she leaves, she takes a last look along the rails, ensuring each season's breath is in its place. Then she closes the door, and the room returns to its patient keeping, a country of cloth held together by sadder and time. Long after the latch settles, the wardrobe keeps breathing quietly. Scent rises and falls with the afternoon, with the pulse of warm air near the windows and cooler air by the floor. If anyone were to open the door at that moment, they might think they had stumbled into a lane market at dusk, where a spice seller and a lion seller share a stall and every breath tells a story. But no one comes. The wardrobe waits for evening, for new sleeves to brush old rails, for a fresh sachet to be tied in place, for the queen to return and choose how she wishes the day to smell. The queen's private apartments grow quieter with each passing season of her life, yet her retreat is not one of neglect or loneliness. It is a deliberate withdrawal, like the closing of shutters against a too bright day. The corridors leading to her rooms are muffled by thick carpets, the air cools, scented faintly of sandalwood and the lingering sweetness of old rose oil. Her chamber is vast but gently lit. Heavy curtains in deep wine red are drawn halfway, letting in just enough light to trace the curve of a carved chair, the gleam of inlaid wood on a writing desk. The fire in the hearth burns low, more for comfort than heat, and a single armchair sits angled toward it as though waiting for her return. This is where she spends her final hours of the day alone, except for a small circle of familiar things. A brazier smolders quietly, releasing coils of incense that rise in slow, unbroken threads. The sound is soft here, the occasional creak of timber, the hush of her silk slippers against the rug, the faint sigh as she lowers herself into a chair. Visitors, when they are permitted, are met not in the grandeur of the audience hall but here, in the warm dimness. They are offered tea steeped with mint or a small glass of cordial, served in cups thin as eggshell. Their voices soften in this space, instinctively matching her measured tone. She listens more than she speaks, her gaze steady, her hands folded loosely in her lap. In this sanctuary, the queen keeps only what pleases her to look upon. A table by the window holds a small arrangement of dry flowers, lavender, rosemary, and a single pale rose whose petals have curled like parchment. The shelves bear more books than jewels, their bindings worn, pages carrying the faint scent of dust and ink. A narrow cabinet hides letters bound in ribbon, their perfumes faded but not forgotten. When the day is done, she moves to the adjoining room, a smaller chamber, almost a cell compared to the rest of the palace. Here, a simple bed stands draped in lion washed with chamomile. A lamp burns low beside it, its light the color of ripe apricots. On the wall above hangs a single painting, a quiet river scene, the brushstrokes so fine the water seems to move if you stare too long. Her attendants help her into a robe of softest wool. They leave when she raises her hand, and the door clicks shut with the finality of a book closing. She pours herself a small cup of warm milk and drinks it slowly, each swallow steady and unhurried. Outside the window, the gardens lie dark, save for the faint silver of moonlight on stone. She does not speak in these moments, not even to herself. The day has been set aside, its noise and demands left at the threshold. The silence here is not emptiness but a kind of fullness of memory, of choice, of the small luxuries she has claimed as her own. When she lies down, the lion is cool against her skin. She draws the quilt over her shoulders, breathes in the faint scent of chamomile, and closes her eyes. The fire hums softly in the hearth, the incense fades to a last thin curl. It is in this stillness, wrapped in the warmth of her chosen isolation, that she seems most entirely herself, not the figure the court bows to, nor the face captured in portraits, but simply a woman at the end of her day, safe in the quiet she has built. And as you stand unseen in the corner, you realize that here, more than in any hall of power or chamber of mirrors, the queen's reign is absolute over her time, her space, and the peace that fills them both. The candles burn low. Now, their flames small and steady, the kind of light that asks nothing more than to be watched. Somewhere beyond these walls, the palace settles into its own sleep, footsteps fading in distant corridors, the last embers in the kitchens sinking into quiet ash. The queen has closed her doors for the night, her rituals complete, her chamber steeped in the scents and textures she has chosen for her life. You find yourself lingering in the memory of her days, those hidden gardens where forbidden flowers bloom without fear, the warmth of a bath scented with rosemary and honey, the music that drifts like silk through a room no one enters without invitation. There were jewels that caught the light of far-off skies, letters perfumed with blossoms that carried voices across mountains and seas, feasts that told stories in flavors, and nights when she slipped into a ballroom unseen, free among her own massed court. Each of these moments was a kind of power, though not the sort etched into history books. It was the power of choice, of claiming the quiet pleasures and eccentricities that made her life entirely her own, even under the crown's heavy weight. In her mirrors, she met herself; in her scents, she carried her memories; in her solitude, she kept her peace. As you let these images drift through your mind, the sound of the palace fades to nothing but the low, steady beat of your own breath. The warmth of her world, its candlelit corners, its rustle of silk, its gentle sense wraps around you like a quilt. The night holds steady, unbroken, and you allow yourself to sink into it. Somewhere in that stillness, the queen sleeps. And perhaps, if you let your thoughts soften enough, you will sleep too, carrying a fragment of her quiet kingdom into your dreams.